Prime Big Deal Days is here.
Woohoo!
Which can lead to involuntary deal squeals, like the classic deal on a new blender squeal.
Yeah!
Save big this Prime Big Deal Days, on now.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast. This is Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Central Texas Life, and it is a joy to bring back to the podcast Lee Klancher, who we spoke to in December of 2023 about his really a coffee table book on the Farmall tractor. And I'll be John Brown if Lee doesn't already have another book that is about to be shipped out, and it is called Snoopy and the Spy. So welcome, Lee.
Great to be here with you, Ann.
Well, and not straying far from your passion for farm implements. What a fascinating story. I mean, it is just so much fun to see where your interest obviously deals with farmers and the farm life. And you have picked now with Snoopy and the Spy, a particular period in history, the 70s to the 80s, that was seminal in the history of International Harvester, for sure. So with my very weak attempt at trying to set up what your book is about, let's talk about it. First of all, Snoopy is not Snoopy in Woodstock.
It's not. Snoopy is a nickname for a series of tractors they introduced in 1979 called the 2+2s. And they had a long nose, they were four-wheel drives, very unusual looking tractor. And they got nicknamed, often they were called the Anteater or Snoopy. They weren't actually, they were nicknames given to them by the competition. It wasn't intended to be complimentary, but they kind of stuck. And it gave us a really fun title. The tractor is central to what's happening at that time between Deere and Harvester. But we just love the nickname and the alliteration, and it sort of went us that way.
Well, now you mentioned the competition. I mean, it really was fierce between these companies, and in the case of International Harvester, really trying to see that its existence continued.
Yeah, it's an incredible time, because what you had was, if you go back to 1964, just to set it up, International Harvester prior to that time had been the world's biggest ag company, and by a vast margin in the very early part of the century. And then in 64, Deere passes them.
You talk about John Deere, the green and yellow tractor.
John Deere, the green and yellow, yeah. As our main character like to say those people with those yellow wheels people. With the main character of the book refers to Deere as that. He's an IH salesman. So when John Deere took over, they had an aggressive new CEO, and Harvester tried to catch up. They really didn't get it together until the early 70s. By then, Deere's new CEO, Bill Hewitt, had John Deere was ahead by a bunch, and Deere was spending a lot. Well, Harvester got a new CEO. They brought him some new management, and they started spending. And those two companies from about 72, 73, until Harvester really failed, were just spending like crazy. And you have Deere trying to maintain this hold on number one, and you've got Harvester trying to get back and also trying to survive. They have a debt load. They have a lot of problems that have been building since the 50s. So it's a really, and then of course, in 79, the farm economy crashes. Our entire economy crashes through the early 80s. And so you have this really dynamic time. And what led me to this was I wanted to do a different kind of a book. I wanted to do a book that had broader appeal than our other books are. They're wonderful. If you want to know everything about farm tractors or
It's in your book.
John Deere, yeah,
It is.
they're there. They're there. But this is really for anybody that lived through this era, is interested in farm history, interested in ag history. This is a book you can sit down. It's not as expensive. It's not as big. And it's great to read. And we did end up illustrating it with.
It's got wonderful pictures in it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and everything, every photo is from the era. So it kind of takes you back and it really helps you understand this battle. It's also just fun to sit down and read. So it's really what we're doing with this is reaching out to a broader audience. That's really why the book exists.
Well, let's talk about your protagonist, John Bud Ewell. He's our spy. He's our spy. And it seems like his heart was in the right place. Maybe the methodology, not.
Bud was Bud was an ex-Marine, and Bud, I believe, viewed life through the lens of a Marine his entire career. After he got out of the Marines, he continued to charge up hills. Anything Bud was doing, he was charging up the hill. He also
down a valley. I mean, it could be
wherever.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Full throttle, going wide open. And he was an incredible storyteller, was part of what made him a fan. He was a sales executive is what he did. And he passed away a few years back. But he had spoken to me. I had 5 hours of tape with him because when you get him on the phone, he just tells story after story. He also spoke at a number of events and those were recorded. So we had a lot of material from Bud, and Bud is so colorful and is such a wonderful storyteller and so quotable. When he first sees the Snoopy tractor, the 2+2 we talked about, because he was put in charge of selling it, he walked in to the engineering center where they showed it to him, and he said, "That's the ugliest thing God ever made." So,
and I get to sell it.
Yeah, right to the point.
Yeah.
But he quickly figured out that once you got over the looks, and if you go back to the original Farmall, that was very true of that tractor.
Mm-hmm.
It was very different than everything, and that's it's tough. Makes it a tough sell. Anytime you've got an audience that's used to XYZ and you have something different, it's harder to sell. So what Bud figured out was if you get people to drive it, they understood it and they could sell it. So he, one of the seminal moments is he figures out that if they launch it with a big grand opening and bring all the dealers in, have them drive it, he thinks they can sell a bunch. That launch, he estimated would cost $1 million. So this is in 1979.
That's crazy.
Oh, it's an insane amount of money. This is a company that, mind you, they're competing, but they're also beginning to struggle. So, it's a lot. He convinced the company, Bud being Bud, to go and do this, and they launch it, and it's a tremendously successful launch. But his personality just pervades the whole thing. And really where we start and where we end is the really dramatic moment is Bud in 1982, John Deere is coming out with a tractor that's competitive to Snoopy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he decides and he learns that they're going to launch it for their dealers at the Superdome in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And so he goes and sneaks in. And that's kind of where the book starts. Then we go back into how we got here. And then it ends with the story of him sneaking into the Superdome and getting caught. Because this is a John Deere only event. He was not supposed to be there.
Right. Well, then that's the corporate espionage kind of aspect of it.
Yeah. And there's a whole chapter. There's a lot of there was a lot there in tractor history. The companies keep a very close eye on each other. And they do all kinds of things. So there's lots of stories that have been collected from other books about people taking machines apart in the middle of the night, people sneaking in and driving machines.
Oh my gosh.
People taking photos, getting tips. One guy, Don Watt, the chief combine engineer, just laid it out how they did it and what they did. And that's That's really fun. It's
Oh, it's fascinating. Well, you have some great quotes, memorable quotes, and here's the first one I found. That this is a international harvester engineer, Don Murray, who said IH was continually in the shadow of competition, primarily deer. We needed something spectacular.
Yeah, Don Murray, and Don Murray is another one who he wrote down all of his memories of how he built the original axial flow. And that's what he's talking about is they needed the axial flow was a big leap, and they needed to do that because deer was kind of eating their lunch.
Now, what does that mean, axial flow? Explain.
Axial flow combine is a combine that uses rotary separation.
Ah.
So the other combines use what's called straw walkers. So basically, think of a flat thing with holes that's vibrating, and the grain falls through the holes.
Okay.
Corn, whatever. And that's the technology that have been used since the dawn of combines. A rotary is a spinning rotor, and the material goes through it and is flung out through little holes in it. A rotary combine, this idea came up in the 1700s. In the 1900s, there was a number of people who tried to develop them, and it is a very, very difficult technology to perfect. Everybody understood the concept would work, but you have air flowing, you have different kinds of materials. A man named Curtis Baldwin founded a company trying to do this and ended up dead and broke, and in fact, committed suicide over this because he could spend his whole life trying to build this company and never was able to perfect it. So it took the IH people from the 1950s until 1976. As late as 1969, the engineers were saying, "Oh, it's ready," and it wasn't ready.
It wasn't.
It was an incredibly difficult. They only were able to develop it because they did it off the books for years. The engineers loved it. The Combine Engineering Center was a long ways from Chicago, where the executives were, and they could get over it. So, but when Murray wrote his line, IH was desperate, and of course the engineers said, "Well, it's ready. We can do it." And so they started throwing money at it, and it became more well known. But it took forever and a lot of money. It came out in 1977, and it did give IH a big raise because they were the first to do it. Well, they in New Holland, there's a whole story about that too. New Holland actually hired away an IH engineer and stole the technology and ended up in court. So that's part of this too.
Yeah.
But that technology now, all the combines today, but Deere didn't develop it till into the 2000s because it was so expensive.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Anyway, axial flow, fascinating. That is part of this.
Well, you get into the whole history of farming and how just something like the width of the rows between cotton plants, how in order to maximize what you're going to get off your land, it makes sense. And the machinery has to, help with that whole process.
It did. And that was one of the big things the 2+2 did. It had big wheels on the back. And if you remember the wheels in the back of a tractor are big, and they're on sliding axles. So the front ones are fixed, right? Think about those.
Right. The
front ones, you have a limited range of adjustment. You used to. Now they've perfected that technology, but back then you didn't. So Snoopy was on these sliding axles. You could just slide it, and you could accommodate the rows, and that was a huge advantage. One of the engineers, Kelly Krabig, who's a longtime Case IH and Case IH engineer, cooperated heavily, and he was such a big help with the tech. And he kept sending me PowerPoints. We'd talk about something, and then 2 days later, this 40-page PowerPoint would show up explaining how this technology changed everything. Wonderful.
Well, that's how you're such an expert in this. Okay, got another quote here. And this is from the governor of Texas in a phone call to Bud Ewell. Says, "Sir, you have 2,834 tractors parked in my yard in San Antonio, Texas. You got 1 week to get them out."
So
what governor? Who was the governor?
Oh my God, there was so much to unpack there. So, what it was there was a large number of tractors that had been built to be sold to Mexico. IH at the time would build these tractors, and they'd make them kind of bare bones and stripped down, and sell them in bundles of about 700 tractors to Mexico. This shipment, somehow the payment didn't make it, and somehow the tractors never left. And somehow in all the chaos at IH, it's about 1981, all the chaos at IH, nobody knew till somebody called Bud Ewell. Now, something to know about Bud Ewell. Bud Ewell says the governor of Texas. Might have been the mayor of San Antonio. Might have been a flunky. Who knows?
We don't. This person is unnamed, is what you're telling me.
Well, just Bud's storytelling. Bud's story.
I love it.
It's always going to be the president of the organization that, and there wasn't, we did do the research. There wasn't 2,800 tractors. There was 700. Still,
that's a lot of tractors.
700 tractors parked on a fairground that you have to figure out how to move.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. But those two are things, and we dig into that in the book, that, Bud had no problem telling a story to, play it up a little bit.
Well, engineering executive Glenn Cahill?
Oh, Dr.
Colley says, I was scared. I mean, you had the sense you'd get fired on the spot if anybody knew about it.
Dr. Colley was the chief engineer for John Deere for many years.
Oh, okay.
And he got hired by Harvester. And he's talking about when he went and interviewed, he was really scared.
Yeah.
He went to Chicago. And he's funny. He said he put a magazine in front of his face when he was in the office so no one recognized him. But he said, later I was like, nobody knows.
Nobody knew who I was anyway.
Yeah, it's fine. But that's what his line. And that talks about the relationship between the two companies at the time, too.
Yeah. International Harvester executive Stanley Lancaster says, quote, I said I'm not coming back for some Mickey Mouse job reporting to some young MBA.
So Harvester in 77 gets a new CEO. Archie McCardle comes from Xerox.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Highest paid executive in American history.
Wow.
Gets this ridiculous bonus. It's all that stuff's in it. So he's a nice guy. Archie, for the people that work to him, he's not very well liked by history. Mm-hmm. But by the executives that worked for Archie, they liked him. He was charming. Archie needed to cut costs. So he hired somebody who was not charming to be his kind of hitman.
Hatchet man,
head of marketing. He quit. But he came back after they got rid of this young MBA. And that's what the line was. It was in the show. Great line.
Yeah. Well, this analyst, Eli S. Lustgarten, says, when you're going to lose $700 million like Harvester will this year, every little bit helps.
Yeah. It's 1981. Harvester didn't lose 700. I think they lost 500. Mm-hmm. But at the end, they were losing money in just staggering.
And it was because farmers just weren't interested in buying the equipment anymore, or John Deere was just that much more popular.
Yeah, I mean, go to 81 too. Yeah. Interest rates are 18%.
Right. Oh yes, obviously. Yeah,
farmers
of course.
Are
and they're horrifically expensive.
Yeah, and crop prices are horrible. Our economy is horrible.
Yeah.
Everything that could go wrong for American business and Americans and American farmers did in that time.
You're right. You're right.
And they had also they were spending money right up until the end because of their, the Xerox guy, Archie McCardle, really believed in technology. He knew they needed new technology to compete. Mm-hmm. So they were dumping money into developing equipment, and then the market drops and it's just lethal. And they also had massive debt going back from the 50s. Oh. So it was a
perfect storm.
Perfect storm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So Bud Ewell says he was going to put handcuffs on me. I said, no, you're not going to put those on me. No. So I mean, he was a spy though.
He was willing to spy. That's when he breaks into the Superdome. He went to the top. There's a bar at the top, and he went up there. Claims he had a beer, but nobody's sure that the bar was actually open. But he does. Some John Deere people see him up there, come up, and they take a big security guard and haul him down. Again, this is one of those quotes. Nobody was there but Bud. Did somebody really gonna cuff him? A cop did escort him home. We're pretty sure of that. Because we also, a guy from John Deere remembered this and reached out to me and said, hey, I want to tell my side of the story. And there was some difference between the two stories. So it's super fun.
Well, I mean, it's just such a fascinating story. It is kind of like, a James Bond novel in the things that they're doing and spying and trying to figure out what new technology is being invented and so forth. And the historical aspect of it is incredible, that you've been able to kind of in a capsule kind of capture a snapshot of this important part of history.
Yeah. It's an important time, and it's, it was interesting. I was pretty young, and it was fun to go back because there was bits of things that when I was a kid I didn't really think about. And now when you look at it, it's like, because that was if you were on a farm business, you were running a business, that was a difficult time.
Yeah. And your background is in farming?
Sort of. My parents were teachers, but we lived on a working farm. So we were out in the country. I was the small town I went to school at for grade school. There was 50 kids. So, it was very rural. It was very ag. My grandfather was a farmer. So I had plenty of background in that. But I wasn't exactly a farm kid. I grew up a teacher's kid.
So tell me again, what really got you just so hyper focused on tractors?
To be honest, I'm real passionate about machinery. I was a gearhead.
Yeah.
And I love books. Those are the two things since I was little. I read every science fiction book at our sci-fi library, at our library, every one on the shelf I read. And I got into motorcycles and cars. So in college, I was a science writer, and I won a number of awards and got some attention. So a local book publisher called me, I think 1995, 4, around there, and said, hey, we're doing these books on farm tractors, and we think your technology writing background and gearhead leanings would mean you'd be good at writing this. So I did. And I wrote a book called Farm All Tractors.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the first one. And I really enjoyed it. I found I love the history. I love the fact that farm machines changed our environment so much. I'm like, my passion was cars and motorcycles. And obviously cars have transformed us, but they didn't feed us.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, they're different. So the impact of the machine was really amazing. I love being out and photographing them. I was an outdoor and wildlife photographer. I did a lot of that stuff, travel photography. It's outdoors. I love the tractor owners. A lot of times people have collectors. They're very meticulous about things. The tractor guys tend to be a little looser, a little more down to earth.
Yeah, salt of the earth kind of guys, though, and gals.
Yeah. And the research, there isn't lots of people researching what I'm researching.
Yeah.
So I like that. If I'm going to go on a hike, I want to go somewhere where I see nowhere. If I want to try a bike race, I want to do the hardest one nobody's crazy enough to do. This kind of is like that. It's an area where, I'm in often uncharted territory, and I love that. So there's just a lot of things about it that just make it something I really enjoy.
Well, Snoopy and the Spy is a definite read for folks. Whether or not you're hyper focused as Lee is on farming and the equipment that made feeding the nation, possible. I look back at this snapshot, as I mentioned, of this particular period in history and all of the perfect storm. It's amazing. We didn't have a crisis in food and so forth.
It's amazing we were able to even get fed and get through that.
Right. So the fact that you're drawing attention to this is awesome, and it's great for people who love history, or and a spy novel on top of that. So wonderful. Lee Klancher, thank you so much for being with us. And again, how can folks get a copy? I know this is through Octane Press.
This is they can get this book anywhere books are sold. I would encourage people to check out, if you want to get it the quickest, you can go to our website, octanepress.com, and order a copy. But any of your local booksellers would have.
Well, and you have a website.
Yes, octanepress.com is a good spot to go. You can sign up if you want to sign up for a newsletter or check out, you can find Octane Press on any of the social media channels.
Right.
We make sure if you're on those channels, you get lots of great information about the books and notification when they come out.
Well, kudos to all the planning that's gone into your website, because I was able to find so much great information, and you can see, some of the great photography that's involved in this book as well. And for that, I think it'd just be a great Christmas gift item if you're looking for a book that's going to be different and something that will really pique someone's interest. It's Snoopy and the Spy by Lee Klancher. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, next book, you call me. Have your people call my people, as they say. No, it's really you contact me. But it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us for Central Texas Life. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Central Texas Life with Ann Harder is part of the Rogue Media family. Be sure to check out our other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate this show 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Life with Ann Harder. This has been a Rogue Media Network production. Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.